UK is still dangerously unready for the next phase of Brexit talks. So, will it be the fudge or the fudge? That's Blower's take on today's crucial Brexit lunch in Brussels. And this little piggy stole nearly all the milk. The Brexit piglet gets fat in Morland's cartoon in the Times, while the NHS, social care and education all miss out on a feed. Lieba Kinster in the Express says the downward trend in immigration is proof that Brexit is working. And in the Times, Claire Foges says that the lazy Brexit labels of Remainer and Leaver are stifling debate and spreading hateful stereotypes. Zoe Williams in The Guardian says the fall of Alan Milburn's commission should remind politicians that no child should go hungry. However, Dominic Lawson in The Mail says Alan Milburn jumped before he was pushed and the country can do without another social mobility czar. And in The Sun, Trevor Kavanagh says the really sordid story surrounding Damien Green's computer is the tale of bitter former police officers who are bent on revenge. Well, joining me to discuss those are Sonia Sodha, who is the chief leader writer at The Observer and a former senior policy advisor to Ed Miliband, and Nick Wood, who's a former press secretary and media director for the Conservative Party leaders William Hague and Ian Duncan-Smith. Welcome to you both. Well, we'll come on to Brexit in a moment, but let's just talk about various views on poverty, which have now been thrown into high focus by this decision of the Social Mobility Commission to resign en masse. What do you make of it? Because, I mean, Zoe Williams is basically saying this is all a bit of a confusion anyway, that social mobility is not really about poverty in her view, and she blames changes in welfare.
Well, I think changes in welfare are both bad for poverty and bad for social mobility. So I would take a slightly different view to Zoe. I think, we should, poverty is a bad thing in of itself, but it's also bad because it impedes social mobility. So I don't see too much tension between the two agendas. In fact, I think they point in the same direction. I think it's really damaging for Theresa May. She's a prime minister who put fairness, opportunity, sticking up for ordinary working families right at the heart of her agenda when she stood on the steps of Downing Street for the first time. And here we've got, the chair of the Social Mobility Commission stepping down, saying that he doesn't doubt her personal commitment to these things, but that the government simply does not have the bandwidth to be tackling social mobility. And I think when you look at things that the government's doing, so for example, cutting in-work benefits for families to the tune of up to thousands of pounds a year, while delivering tax cuts for more affluent families. If you look at their education reforms, they're pursuing grammar schools, which we know don't do much for social mobility. Well, they have sort of put it to one side, but they put a huge amount of political capital into that. They're just not focused on the right things. I mean, Nick, on the other hand, we got Dominic Lawson saying pompous Milburn is wrong about Britain's have and have-nots, basically suggesting that as the economy improves, so everyone will benefit.
Yes, I think it's always a bit of a danger to appoint a Labour cabinet minister when you're a Conservative
Well, Gillian Shepherd resigned as well, though, didn't she?
Indeed, but it was Milburn who took the lead on this. I mean, I think we're all for social mobility. I think the argument is largely about how one encourages it. The Zoe Williams piece seems to be arguing much more for a statist approach in which the government should assume even greater responsibilities to ensuring, for instance, that children get 3 meals a day, that they're looked after almost round the clock. It's not exactly a big ask, though, is it? Making sure that kids get 3 meals a day. I mean, surely their parents have some responsibility in this, unless you're going to have a national food service. Of course, but we've got a situation where...
But this is something which successive Conservative leaders have subscribed to with things like the living wage, for example.
There's a certain amount government can do to alleviate poverty. Of course there is. We are spending the best part of £100 billion a year, which is equivalent to the budget of the health service, on welfare benefits of one kind and another. So, I mean,
a lot of that is taken up by pensions, though.
No, the pensions are another 140 billion on top. The total amount of money is 250 billion, which is 1/3 of public spending. It's a huge amount of money is being spent. I mean, you'd think sometimes, reading the left, that there was actually no provision. I mean, essentially, we provide a safety net. We can't do much more. We haven't got the money.
I think what the left is criticising, though, is you've got a government who's delivering tax cuts which are very expensive, that go to more affluent families, to businesses, while they are cutting up to thousands of pounds a year from
the point about cutting tax is really simple. It gives a dynamic boost to the economy. I'm not a great advocate for Mr. Trump, but the one thing he's doing...
I just want to ask you both a question, see if we can get agreement on this, because I'm confused. The question is inequality on the increase, and are there now more people in absolute
there's loads of data that it is not on the increase. I mean, there's loads of official data showing that income inequality is at its lowest level for 30 years. There's this thing called the Gini coefficient, which is run by the OECD, and it's never been higher in Britain.
If you look at relative poverty, though, which looks at inequality at the bottom and how the bottom tranche of society is faring, that is on the up. The Institute for Fiscal Studies says that child poverty is going to reach record levels by 2020, 2021. That is absolutely shameful for a government that says that it purports to care about social mobility and fair opportunity. It's a disgrace.
The people who've seen the biggest relative decline in income since the crash are the top 10%, and their income has declined in the last 5-10 years.
Okay, don't think we're going to get much more agreement on the subject of leaving the European Union than we have on poverty so far. I mean, Claire Foges makes this point that it really does seem to split the country. Do you think it has? The whole Brexit,
I think you can overdo
versus Brexit extremists, as Alistair Campbell
I think Claire Foges has probably been to one or too many dinner parties in which there's clearly been a blazing row and people have stomped out in disgust on one side or the other. But I think across the country, the sense I get among Remainers, the defeated tribe...
You know what I'm telling you.
Well, several, not too many. The sense I get of them is that a lot of people are saying, well, will the government please just get on with it now?
I think it's very interesting. I think David Cameron held this referendum really to primarily heal divisions within his own party. It was this incredibly naive view. You know, Claire Foges was part of that administration. She was a speechwriter. There was this naive view that holding the referendum would lance the boil. It would get this issue out of the way. But when you put an incredibly divisive issue in front of a country, in front of a party, it's yes, no, essentially. The idea that that's going to, everyone's just going to sort of, it's all going to go away afterwards, particularly when, the referendum didn't resolve some of the biggest questions about Brexit. It just said, should we leave? It didn't say, how are we going to leave? What sort of deal are we going to get?
Have either of you lost friends over this?
No.
No, but I never had any on that side anyway.
What? No, I've got friends who voted leave, and of course, friendship runs deeper than I think often than
I think so too.
The political divide.
Some people do get really wound up about it, though. I can see Claire's point in that sense.
Now, what about the Juliet Samuel point? They're basically saying it's all very well talking about this, but actually we're making a mess of it and we don't know what we want in the next phase.
Well, it's kind of very much a media theme, this, isn't it? That it's all going wrong, it's all dreadful, which in some ways is just a continuation
of... This is a constructive article, isn't it?
I think she's rather jumping the gun. I mean, the next phase, the important thing about, are we going to get a next phase? We should learn a bit more about that today. But, we definitely want a next phase. And the point I think that needs to come through, we should stop talking about how much money we're going to give these people for that next phase and start talking about what we want.
These people, they're our partners. I think this article...
They're not behaving particularly partnerish, are they?
Well, neither are we, Nick.
I think we've done. I think we've fallen.
I think the thing about this article is, I think Juliet Samuel is absolutely right to say the Cabinet is incredibly divided on this and there is no sort of thrashed out plan, and that is really quite damaging because as soon as we move to the next stage, the Cabinet really does need an idea of where we're going. But I think, unfortunately, the plan she puts forward, it's very much still we can have it all just if we ask the EU hard enough. And yet we know that the EU, they don't want to let us cherry pick because that might lead to an unravelling of the European Union with other countries breaking away, saying, well, we'd like to cherry pick as well.
The Cabinet was divided over staying in the single market. It was divided over the customs union. The government, for all its faults now, it's got plenty of them, the government's come together on those two key points.
We're going to have to leave it there. Thank you both very much, Lee, for not falling out. This is All Out Politics, coming up next on a crucial